Namaskar and welcome. Today, we are diving into a really powerful philosophy, one that shines a light on a hidden struggle happening all around us in society. It's a framework that doesn't just identify the deep roots of exploitation, but it also gives a clear and pretty urgent mission for every moral person out there. And this quote right here, this is the heart of the matter. It perfectly captures the tension that we're going to explore. It really sets the stage for this fundamental conflict between two opposing forces, a conflict that, defines so much of our social world and often leaves good people feeling totally powerless.
So what is this conflict really? Well, the source material frames society not as some peaceful, happy coexistence, but as a constant battleground. There's an ongoing, unseen war being waged every single day.
At the very core of this struggle are two fundamental forces. On one side, you've got what's called the sentient force. That's the drive towards progress, towards morality, towards a higher consciousness. And on the other side, you have the static force. That's the pull towards stagnation, immorality, and just inertia. The source material is crystal clear on this. These two are locked in a ceaseless struggle, and there is absolutely no room for a compromise or a pact between them.
Okay, so we've got this big cosmic struggle happening. But how does that actually play out in our lives? This is where this philosophy gets really practical. It argues this isn't just some abstract idea. It shows up as tangible exploitation, and an exploitation that goes way deeper than what we usually see on the surface.
I mean, think about it. Most of us can spot economic exploitation pretty easily, right? We see unfair wages, we see price gouging, and we know something's wrong. But the source argues that the most insidious, the most dangerous form of exploitation isn't economic at all. It's psychic. It's literally an attack on the mind.
And the number one weapon in this psychic war is dogma. Vested interests use these rigid, irrational beliefs to inject complexes into people's minds. Inferiority complexes, superiority complexes. It creates this kind of fool's paradise, where the people being exploited aren't even aware they're being controlled. In fact, they might even refuse to believe they're victims at all.
So, the big question is, how do we become so vulnerable to this kind of manipulation? How do these dogmas actually take root in our minds? Well, it all comes down to the very nature of knowledge itself and how we get it.
According to this philosophy, not all knowledge is created equal. There's a distinction between two fundamental types. First, you've got what's called relative knowledge, or praptavakya. That's basically everything we learn from the outside world. But then there's another kind, absolute knowledge, or aptavakya, which is described as a direct, intuitive insight from a universal source.
Now, the problem with relying only on this relative knowledge is that it can be super flawed. For instance, our own senses can trick us, like seeing a mirage in the desert. The conclusions we draw from things can be based on totally faulty logic, and even the authorities we're taught to trust, like scriptures, can be misinterpreted or even twisted to exploit people.
And this is where the idea of absolute knowledge becomes so critical. The source presents it as the key to liberating our intellect. The idea is that because this knowledge is universal, rational, and deeply connected to our core psychology, it acts like an internal compass. It allows a person to see right through the deceptions of dogma and break those mental chains of exploitation from the inside out. So if what we learn from the outside world can be flawed, where does that leave us? How do we build a solution? This is where the philosophy proposes a totally new moral compass, a framework that's designed to directly counter these exploitative models. This table here lays out the source's comparison of 4 different philosophies, and it's pretty stark. It argues that dogma-centered philosophies just lead to conflict. Matter-centered ones, like Marxism, ultimately result in brutality, and self-centered ones, like capitalism, end up dividing society. But then it presents the God-centered approach, defined by its core motive of serving all beings as the one true path to unity and universal well-being. And here's the thing, this isn't just some theory to be debated in a classroom. The source presents it as a practical, personal mission. It's a call to action for every single person who considers themselves a moralist. Okay, let's break down this threefold duty. First, it starts with you. You've got to cultivate your own personal morality, do intuitional practices, and build that inner strength and determination. Second, it's about community, uniting with other moral people to overcome that feeling of frustration and build collective power. And third, it's a direct call to action, to mercilessly fight against sin and immorality wherever you find it. But this fight has a very specific target. The goal is not the sinner, it's the sin itself. The ultimate objective is always the highest ideal,
the supreme consciousness. And anything that stands in the way of that goal, whether it's a system, a dogma, or any form of exploitation, it has to be removed.
The source leaves us with this incredible metaphor to think about. Imagine the pole star is your unchanging moral guide. The clouds are the dogma, the exploitation, the confusion that's blocking your view of it. So the question for each and every one of us is, what are our clouds, and what do we have to do to clear them so we can see the light and follow it again?
And that brings us to this final, resounding call to action. It's a charge to live your life not passively, but as a warrior for morality, to engage in a constant fight against those forces of stagnation and exploitation with the absolute conviction that in this struggle, you will be victorious.
If this gave you a new perspective on things, make sure you subscribe and follow our channel for more deep dives into these kinds of complex ideas. Thanks so much for joining us.